Hello, my name is Maria Bezubova and you're at my channel Fertilizers Jazz. Here we talk about events, trends, technologies in the world of fertilizers and agriculture. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, and let's jazz! Today I'm thrilled to open for you a new topic that we still haven't discussed here in the channel, and it is about green fertilizers and sustainability. There are a lot of discussions around this topic. It is a very hot one at the moment. And in order to uncover it for you, I invited a very, very cool guest, Nikita Levine, Business Development Director of ATOME PLC, company that develops a fascinating project of green CIN in Paraguay. I am happy to welcome you, Nikita, and thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, Maria. Good to be with you, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So let's start with the very beginning, I would say. Let's start from the roots of the project. Can you please tell me and the audience why ATOME decided to develop such a complex project, actually not being in the fertilizers industry before?
Good question. It's a question we ask ourselves quite often, actually. But I suppose just as an overview today, ATOME is an industry leader in the international development of dedicated greenfield green fertilizer projects. So we have a pipeline of around 600 megawatts, principally in Latin America. And our first project is in Vieta in Paraguay, and that's close to its final investment decision, which we're targeting for this year. But as to why we decided to do this, well, our journey started out a little differently. So going back to 2020, 2021, whilst green hydrogen, so zero carbon hydrogen produced using water electrolysis was touted, let's say, as the Swiss Army knife of decarbonization with the potential to lower emissions in industry, transportation, and chemicals, we really took a pragmatic approach. And at that time, we asked ourselves, where is the market today? So we know that the majority of today's hydrogen is used for, or a large amount is used for the production of ammonia. Out of these, let's say roughly 180, 190 million tons of ammonia today, 80% of this is dedicated to the production of fertilizer. So instead, unlike, let's say, many much more larger scale developers, we decided that instead of producing an intermediary product, which hydrogen and ammonia ultimately is, we were going to go straight to the end product, where we didn't have to rely on the build out of the end market, on build out of specialist infrastructure or certain subsidies, and therefore produce a low carbon fertilizer for which there's a ready market, a ready demand today, in which we can immediately not only help farmers, but also help food companies and consumer packaged good companies to really decarbonize their value chains, their supply chains, and specifically doing this in regions where there is limited to no domestic production of fertilizer. So both from a market and logistics point of view, it was pragmatic to choose fertilizer as the sector. From the other perspective, and a very important perspective, there's also the climate angle. So we touched on market, and now it's about climate, because whilst there are great strides to decarbonize shipping, aviation, and other industry, the reality is that the production use of fertilizer emits more harmful emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, than aviation and shipping industries combined on a yearly basis. So that's around 2.6 billion tons of CO2 emissions per year. And that excludes the wider food value chain, right? That's just production and use of fertilizer rather than the whole food ecosystem, which is nearly a quarter, actually. So therefore, not only does it make sense to focus on decarbonization of fertilizer from a market perspective, a market readiness perspective, but also it's a sector in which we can actually make and is actually ready to absorb material emissions reductions impact today. I would just also add that whilst I agree it's a complex process, speaking from first-hand experience, and naturally these large infrastructure projects take a lot longer than expected, and yes, it is difficult, but the project is very much real, and it's happening. And our risk-based infrastructure approach is not really new. The technology we're using is not groundbreaking. It's at high technology readiness levels. They are commercial technologies. Electrolyzers have been around for a century. Haber-Bosch nitrogen fertilizer production has been around for a long time as well. But what we're doing is really integrating these technologies together at an industrial scale. These aren't pilots, these are large infrastructure projects. And so that integration of the technologies is really what gives the project its complexity. So I suppose to conclude, yes, it's exciting being a newcomer. It is difficult being a newcomer, and it's difficult to get it done on time. And we're doing a lot of learning along the way. We're doing a lot of educating along the way. But our approach is robust. It's traditional. We have the right team. We have the right partners. And so we believe that once the first project's done, project 2, 3, 4, and so on, will hopefully be a bit more straightforward and a bit easier to do.
Sounds great. Sounds great. And can you please tell more about the project itself? So I have many questions about that. So first of all, why Paraguay?
Yeah.
And maybe you can tell more a bit like what are the capacities? What is your plan in terms of product portfolio there? So all these project-related details.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose the project itself, it's the Vieta project in Paraguay. It's our flagship green fertilizer project. It's named after the city near which it's located, which is the Vieta city of Vieta, which is around 60 kilometers south of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. And the Vieta project is expected to produce around 260,000 tons of low carbon calcium ammonium nitrate fertilizer, CAN. So we expect and really working towards the fact that at the point of production in 2028, it will be the largest dedicated green fertilizer facility in the world. Ultimately, the production process is in no material way different to how CAN is produced today, other than the fact that we're using green hydrogen as a feedstock, green hydrogen to produce the green ammonia, which is what gives it the green nitrogen element as the feedstock. So rather than, how today majority of hydrogen is produced using natural gas or coal, we're using renewable power and water, which is quite exciting. The key question you asked is why Paraguay? And I think that's a question we get quite often and a question we like to answer. So I suppose one of the most important and simple reasons for that is location and access to low-cost baseload renewable power. So green hydrogen derivatives, the cost driver really is the OPEX, so the renewable power that is used to split the water molecule, the H2O into H, hydrogen, O, oxygen. Power is really the cost driver there. So any location where there is an abundance of low-cost, accessible capacity of renewable power is absolutely critical to develop one of these projects in order to remain competitive and to be able to deliver this type of product to market. And Paraguay has this in abundance, really, because it is home to the 14 gigawatt Itaipu Dam, second largest hydroelectric dam in the world, and it shares it jointly with Brazil. Paraguay only uses around 30% of that power, and the excess is sold back actually so it's a heavy net exporter of power. It's sold back to Brazil and Argentina, to its neighboring countries. So therefore, immediately in a country like Paraguay, we identified a serious opportunity where we are able to use this excess power for the development of our project, and provide Paraguay, with ourselves as a reliable customer who will offtake this power to develop a premier industrial scale facility, have significant domestic impact, so build up of domestic industry, generate significant employment, and help the region achieve its climate goals, sustainability goals, and provide the region with a bit more self-sufficiency of fertilizer, because it's a region that imports a lot of fertilizer today because it doesn't have domestic production. That leads kind of to the other point of why Paraguay. It's the proximity to the market. So Paraguay is in the heart of Mercosur, the trade block consisting of Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, which are very important food producers. And essentially it is the world's major food basket. So Brazil is the world's #1 net food exporter. Paraguay itself is the world's fourth largest exporter of soybean, and I think top 10 for cattle, rice, stevia, that sort of stuff. And therefore, it's important to be able to cater to that local market, which currently relies on imports. You know, the market itself is for fertilizer is huge in Latin America, around 30 million tons a year, I believe, and it imports 95% of that. So being able to provide a decentralized solution, a decentralized production to compete with volatile, let's say, imports, which rack up costs as they are transported inland all the way from Europe or other regions, is really what's pretty critical here, and is the significance of the project.
I see. Thank you. And another question: who is your partner in this project, especially in terms of sales? Because as you mentioned, ATOME is just a newcomer in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we recognized in order to get this project online, to get it financed, we have to really present the best possible case for a green fertilizer production in Paraguay, to educate about what we're trying to do for the region, and to get the best possible partners, the most appropriate partners for what we're trying to do. So we have a number of quality supportive partners into the project itself in terms of milestones, and I can explain in terms of milestones of our project development where we have achieved and who we're partnering with. As I said, power is really key here. So we have secured a PPA of 145 megawatts of baseload power, and we're working with ANDE, who's the national power company of Paraguay, on that. The PPA is with them over a long term. We have acquired the land on the site, so that's done. We've completed the front-end engineering design with our contractors, Casale, and that really confirms all the foundational engineering of the project. We have completed the environmental social impact assessments. So we have the environmental licenses, the licenses to operate. We have received also a free trade zone where our project will be built. And kind of on the more critical points, at the end of last year, we announced Casale as our EPC contractors, the sole EPC contractor. And they, of course, bring a wealth of experience and expertise in ammonia and fertilizer technologies, one of the world's oldest licensors of ammonia technologies. And so they are really helping us along the way. And one of our next steps there is to finalize the EPC contract with them. So we have a very credible partner who has hundreds of projects around the world of this nature. And that's one aspect in terms of the project construction and project build out. The other aspect is, of course, offtake. What's important for a project like this to get funded and to proceed is to make sure that you have a credible offtake partner, offtake entity who is going to take the production over a long term and be able to market that in the region or region of choice, right? And for us, we were very delighted when we first announced kind of entry into heads of terms and agreed terms with Yara in July last year. So that's a very important milestone for us and also for Yara's portfolio. And being a global leader, they're very much at the forefront of the decarbonisation of the agriculture and food space. And so they will be off-taking 100% of our production over a long term. And they're extremely well-versed in Latin America in CAN, which is our product of choice. And I suppose another key milestone that we made just recently, just last month, is that we announced entry also into heads of terms with Hy24 for the equity commitment into the project funding, right? So Hy24, the world's largest clean hydrogen asset manager. It's a joint venture between 5T Hydrogen and Ardian, which has around 180 billion, I think, assets under management. And they've committed to serve as the anchor and lead equity investor into the project with an investment of up to $115 million. So that is extremely significant. They have a number of world-class investments in their portfolio around the world, in the Americas, in Europe. And so with them, they're bringing expertise, they're bringing the ability to attract further capital into the project. And really, it is a significant milestone in order to get the project to the point where we can start construction and get it fully financed. So those are really the key partners that we have. We're working and in good communications with them very often, I'm pleased to say, and we are, they're there with us certainly for this journey at the Vieta project, and we hope beyond.
It's a cool team, I must say. The best one, definitely, and especially in such a long journey and such a difficult journey, which I believe is green fertilizers. So now I propose to move from the project details itself a bit more to the market discussion, because I'm sure that, starting this journey, you spend hundreds of hours doing market research of green fertilizers market and understanding, let's say, how it works, how perspective is that. And here, I would like to take kind of, a devil's advocate role a bit, because yes, of course, green fertilizers and generally sustainable fertilizers, it is something that is definitely the future of the industry, and it is developing very rapidly now. There is a lot of concrete steps in terms of sustainability in general in the industry. But unfortunately, reality is much more difficult, than we all plan and we all wish. So there are, as for me, there are a couple of things which prevent the booming development of green in general, and specifically green in fertilizers. There are so many black swans that come into our reality, like war that started in the middle of Europe and changed the whole situation. For example, with gas supply to the industry, with the cost of supply of fertilizers, or now tariff wars that again influence that much the whole industry. So do you think right now, we are today in this moment in 2025, so today, what is your expectation from the green fertilizers market? How do you think, how large it will become? How quickly it will develop? And is this today's understanding, is it different from that you started from, let's say, when you started this journey?
Yeah, I think to answer the second question is that it's been a bit of a ride over the last 3-4 years, right? Because there was a lot of emphasis in 2020, 2021 on the green agenda, on sustainability. And with events that followed, unfortunately, that really shifted to security and affordability. And that is also, I would say, the advantage of what we're trying to do, because not only are we trying to really decarbonize food value chains, but we're also trying to diversify supply of fertilizer. And we're also trying to diversify supply of fertilizer in regions which currently do not have domestic production, like I mentioned, in Latin America. So I suppose things are moving forward, maybe not as quickly as we had expected, and it has been difficult, yes, but ultimately what we're trying to do at Vieta and replicate in our other projects as well, is the fact that we want to be able to provide a competitive form of competitively priced and cost-effective fertilizer. So of course it's good to go green, but if those green fertilizers come at massive premiums, that is not so good for the farmer. That is not so good for food inflation. That is why we select projects in locations where we can remain competitive, with imports, competitive with grey fertilizer that is currently being imported into those regions, and so on. So for instance, why do we choose CAN? CAN fertilizers not only in the way that we produce it will be green, low carbon, but it also has superior and sought after agronomic properties. It's a nitrate fertilizer. So not an agronomist, just to be clear, but as a nitrate, CAN has higher nutrient use efficiency, greater nutrient absorption. So in theory, on a field trial basis, right, you can apply less of it in order for similar kind of crop yields. It's better for soils, less nitrogen loss. So it's a good fertilizer that farmers can substitute, right? Substitute out as both a decarbonization lever and in terms of kind of maintaining their production and crop yields. So that is a form of security. That is a form of affordability, which it touches on. And the market for green has its challenges, absolutely. We will be the first project to produce industrial scale volumes into the market. And it's difficult, therefore, to say kind of at this moment in time how much of the value, what sort of value will be given to green fertilizers in general. I can kind of more comment on our project, but and how much of that the total nitrogen demand will be green. But we do see strides taking place. So currently there are small examples, but on smaller volumes that indicates that demand for green is there. There have been a number of agreements that have been made public. Yara and PepsiCo, for instance, have had an agreement where Yara will be supplying, I think, around 160,000 tons of low carbon fertilizer to PepsiCo for decarbonization of their food production chain. There's Fertiberia, M&S as well. They have a partnership, and we see that moving into other regions as well. So not just Europe, where we really need to diversify supply, and we need to go green, but also in Latin America. So Yara has a partnership for low carbon fertilizer supply with coffee growers in Brazil. So you can see that change is really happening globally. It's hard to speak about value as a first mover at this moment in time, and it's hard to speak about volumes just yet. But we do see a number of initiatives that are really shaping the space and really allowing green fertilizer, if it's produced cost competitively, which is what we're seeking to do, to really take shape. And of course, there are a number of, it's not just agriculture needs to be decarbonized and secured as a space. So it's not just low carbon fertilizer technologies that can be deployed into the space. There are a number of decarbonization levers, but the beauty of green nitrogen fertilizer, what we're doing is that, yes, it can have a major impact on security of supply as well as on climate, but it's not a major disruptor, because at the end of the day, what we're producing is just a regular bag of fertilizer. It doesn't know if it's green, blue, pink, black, gray, whatever. It's a bag of fertilizer that can be applied by farmers in the same way.
Yeah,
I hope
thank
that's
you. Yes, thank you. But still, my devil's advocate is not, fully fully sure yet. So first of all, are you planning to sell 100% of this CIN in Brazil, in Latin America, right? Did I understand that correctly? So there is no plan to take it out of Latin America to other markets.
So our CAN, what we're discussing with Yara is our marketing partner. So they have as I mentioned, they have a large market share and handle a lot of CAN in Latin America. The immediate market for us is there. So that's one of our advantages, is that the market doorstep. So both, let's say what we're targeting is the main food production regions, the crop systems in Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, right? Those are the immediate markets. Those are where we can really leverage on the logistical premiums and compete with imports. Of course, if there's demand, if there's end user demand in Europe or elsewhere, we would, of course, be very happy. I'm sure ourselves with Yara would be very happy to consider that. But the market is right there regionally.
I see. Why I'm asking that, because till now, all my knowledge about the projects that you mentioned, completely right, they are still small ones, like fragmented ones, but all of them were talking in terms of sales and targeting in terms of sales only the highest developed markets. Only those markets, so we are talking about Europe, and not even the full Europe, but let's say selected countries of Europe. We are talking about Australia. So all those US, these markets which have very, very developed agenda in terms of sustainability at all. That's why when I heard about the project of CIN, like in the middle of one of the cheapest markets, in terms of products that are being sold there for now, I was surprised, and I was immediately interested, to discuss that with you. So
Yeah.
moving further in terms of market discussion, what do you think are those major hurdles for, in general, development of green fertilizers market and specifically for the project, for your project? What are
Yeah.
those hurdles and how to, let's say, how you tackle them and how to tackle in general these
Yeah.
problems?
I'd say just to start with, start specifically with our project is that we have kind of all the key ingredients in place. So the power, steady supply of low-cost power, crucial, offtake, crucial. And now we're going through the elements in order to get to our final investment decision, FID, and have full financial close of the project. Thereafter, we start construction. So there are a number of items in place we need to get there, including finalizing certain contracts and getting the rest of the equity and debt funding in to get to our project to a funded stage. So that's in terms of the project. And let's say in terms of the wider sphere, I think the issue for green fertilizers at the minute is being able to match supply and demand. So currently there are very few developers doing this, and we need to have green fertilizer at scale. Very few developers doing this, of which we believe we're at the forefront. And I think the barrier for these projects getting financed and achieving final investment decision and allowing more supply into the market is to have an offtake agreement in place, right? So you have a credible partner like Yara who's willing to market and offtake the product. And why is that a struggle? Not just in green fertilizer, but in green hydrogen, green ammonia projects. It's because often these projects have too much of a high cost base because of higher cost of power, tough logistics, and no access to end market there, right? So there are loads of announced projects, gigawatt scale projects, where we decided to do is to go a bit more of a realistic scale, so 100 to 150 megawatts, and be able to kind of advance and build up our portfolio that way, being close to an existing market, not a market that's coming tomorrow, and really cater to logistical and product premium advantages. So there's not many places in the world where this is possible, and that's why Paraguay is a crucial location for us, as well as some of the other locations that we have, such as Costa Rica, at a much earlier stage. So whilst there is great push from players like ATOME and the private sector to develop these projects, we also need some regulatory support and pressure. So, we've discussed a lot, there's been a lot of discussion about the carrot and stick approach. So it's push and pull, right? So specific to our industry, the push factors, where we can say in Europe are the ETS, so carbon allowances, carbon border adjustment mechanism, so CBAM, which will tax carbon intensive imports of certain products, fertilizers being one of them, which pushes end users to really adopt more cleaner technologies, cleaner practices, find cleaner import partners. But then there's also the pull factors, and the pull is from the consumer, the end user, which is the food companies, the consumer packaged good companies, and these are companies which are doing this out of either their own corporate targets, so SBTI targets, for instance, and also some other pressures and decisions they make on a policy or on a stakeholder shareholder basis. So we do need this to come together. I mean, it's right that you said earlier that Europe is sort of leading the way on this, and geopolitics and changes in presidents around the world kind of makes this a bit of a volatile matter, but this is pretty much ingrained in European mentality, and we see that this is really setting and paving the way for other similar push and pull systems in other regions. At the end of the day, the food market is global. We may be consuming food that's grown in Brazil, and vice versa, right? So it's important that as a global effort, people are aligned and that dedicated value chains are secure and aligned in terms of their decarbonization goals. What we're trying to do is cost competitive. So we're trying to really compete with grey fertilizer. And the fact that we're using low cost power, the fact we're in Paraguay close to the market, means we can achieve parity with grey fertilizer in the region, right? Which is important. But anyhow, the push and pull factors which we discussed, the pull factors are coming from the food companies, and ultimately it's the consumer that's paying for it. But by the time it reaches the consumer, we don't forecast, but by the time it reaches the consumer, certain analysts predict that the cost for the end product is less than 1%. So, you know, for a wheat farmer, for instance, fertilizer represents up to 50% of emissions for the production of, you know, bread, for a loaf of bread. But by the time it comes to our supermarket shelves, this is actually 1 cent added to the loaf of bread. So it's something that you know, I think we need a bit of social buy-in, but it's something that is certainly can be adopted and afforded by the vast majority of the population. And, you know, when we go flying, when we fly on holiday or fly for business, you know, we do accept inflation and premiums if we're using, you know, if the plane or the airline is using sustainable aviation fuel or offsetting using carbon credits. So we can choose to do that, but we can't choose not to eat. And so, you know, if it's a cent here or there by being able to decarbonize our value chain and provide a lower carbon food product on our supermarket shelves, then that's the important part.
Thank you. Thank you. Talking about this push and pull, so yeah, we see it very clearly, as you mentioned, in Europe. But by the way, CBAM already is a question mark if it can be put in place as quickly as Europe was planning to. We will see it very soon, I guess. And how this push and pull system works in Latin America. So do you see these developments in terms of you know, support of the governments, Paraguay, Brazil, other markets? How do they move towards that?
I think they're looking at Europe and they're thinking, you know, how can we sort of implement a similar framework in Latin America? So LATAM's a big place, you know, locally. Our projects, we're having great support for what we're doing. That's because, of course, of the climate impact, but also the development impact. This is a big investment. Total project costs around $630 million. So this is a large bit of FDI into Paraguay, but also for a self-sustainability factor, right? These are currently places which don't have. Paraguay, for instance, doesn't have domestic hydrocarbon production. It imports all finished goods, imports all fertilizers. How can they become more self-sustaining? And that's part of the solution. Brazil, for instance, has been making quite a few strides in terms of its low carbon hydrogen laws. They have a lot of investment in the northeast of the country, and they're looking to make access to developers a lot more accommodating. And at the same time, fertilizer, I think they are currently looking at supporting domestic production, because for them it's absolutely crucial that they have some sort of domestic supply or projects that intend to supply the domestic key food producing regions, Mato Grosso do Sul, for instance, right? Because it's not just Brazil, it's not just Latin America that depends on these, it's the world. These are very large industrial crop systems that feed the world globally, from coffee, citrus, soybean, maize. These are all crops that we consume kind of on a daily basis. So I think Europe is very much setting the way, and yes, CBAM has had its issues, for instance, but I think the framework is there, and I think other countries are looking. I can speak for Latin America, but I can't speak for Latin America, but I can, from our Latin American experience, we can say that they are looking at what's happening in Europe and trying to implement that. Similarly, in the US, which is a little bit of a different case, in 2022, you had the Bipartisan Act, so the Inflation Reduction Act that was introduced, and suddenly you had so many developers of low carbon molecules looking to benefit from tax credits, looking to benefit from subsidies that were in the US. So there's a lot of inflation, a lot of interest in the US at that point. And I suppose, you know, with the introduction of the Inflation Reduction Act, that did create some competitive tension with Europe and with other regions. But I suppose that's a good thing in the sense that it can only accelerate the transition.
Yes, indeed, it makes total sense, and I hope that it will start rolling sooner than later, let's say. And regarding the status of the project, so when do you expect the final investment decision to be?
So
taking?
as we publicly stated, we're targeting final investment decision by the end of the first half of this year, so around the end of June. And after that, we begin construction on the project.
Indeed. Can you please tell also a couple of words about your next project? Because yes, I understand it's still on the first stage, but I think it's a very interesting one as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have a second project in Paraguay, Shock, which is 300 megawatts, which is twice the size of Vieta. And that is at a stage where it's pre-PPA. So we're working towards the power agreement with ANDE, our partners for the power partners for the first project. And we've completed certain electromechanical studies and certain studies about the project. It's about the early stage development of the project itself. But that's our next project, and that's 300 megawatts in Paraguay, the product of which will not necessarily be CAN. It could be multi-product. We could look at green ammonia. The reality is we are very, as you can tell, we're very market-led. We take a very product-led approach. So whatever the right product is will be for that market is what will go into the design and build out of the plant. We also have another earlier stage development project in Costa Rica, which will also be looking at supplying Costa Rica and the regional Caribbean Central American market with green fertilizer. Again, we're partnered with ICE, which is the national power company there, and we are currently interested in finding out about the right product for the regional. So it is an agricultural powerhouse in some ways. They're one of the top producers of banana in the world, coffee also. So there's a lot of premium products that is good that we can target in that region, and supply again is needed because it's currently imported there. So you can see that there's a pattern between Paraguay and Costa Rica and what we look at. And again, from a power perspective, Costa Rica is all predominantly hydropower. So those are our next two projects. They're an earlier stage, but for us, very much it's important to get to final investment decision and to progress with our Vieta project, after which we can really look to expand on our existing pipeline, as well as look at other regions.
Massive projects, and I really wish you all the best on this bumpy road. But yeah, eventually it is the way where the whole industry goes and the whole world goes. So that's good to be, the first one on this path. And I wish all the best to ATOME, and I wish all the best to you. So thank you very much for being today with me.
Thank you very much for having me, and I enjoyed speaking to you, and hope we can deliver some good news over the next few years.
Definitely, definitely. I'm sure we need to meet in some time, and definitely see the first ton here on the channel as well.
Yeah, indeed. That would be great.
Thank you for watching. As usually, I will leave all credentials of Nikita and ATOME PLC in the comments. Please let me know in the comments which other questions related to green fertilizers market or this specific project you are interested to uncover, and I will be happy to do so with Nikita next time. Please subscribe to this channel, put like to this video, and see you soon.